Good morning, everyone. Again, we've got about one more minute. We'll give folks to join in, get situated. About 47 participants so far in the room. There was a question in the Q&A. Will this space, the question and answer space, be available for live real-time questions? Yes. It will be. So the Q&A is available for those who were not able to send in questions in advance. That's how we'll be capturing questions in this conversation. Okay. So I think we are ready to get started. We'll go ahead and jump in. Kiana, good to go?
Good to go.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. My name is Loren Taylor. I am the Oakland City Council member representing District 6 in City Hall. But more than that, I am a father to Manny, a 3rd grader, and Cameron, a 7th grader, going to school here in Oakland. I'm a product of Oakland Public Schools. I was raised by a product of Oakland schools. My mom, being a teacher, retired as a teacher and administrator in OUSD. I'm raising kids who are products of Oakland schools. And so because of that, the future of our school district, the future of our kids is deeply personal to me. And that's why when I first learned about the tough decisions that were, being explored, considered, it was important for me to really understand what was going on and make sure that we're centering and prioritizing our kids. I came out and said 2 things specifically: the education of our children must be our top priority, and that any closure of our schools should be an absolute last resort after all other options have been exhausted. And we have come off of a very difficult, challenging, I will say just emotional roller coaster of a week. And what I've heard from so many folks is the range of emotions, concerns, frustration, confusion, you name it, that they have experienced, and wanting some way to be able to ask those questions in a forum where we can, really get to an understanding, where we can understand the trauma, the experience, the what's underlying that, and also channel some of that energy in terms of how we can best support each other. And that's the reason that I wanted to have this discussion. And I'm grateful that, there has been, I guess, a desire, and many others have wanted to participate in this as well. Before jumping in, I did want to just have a few announcements just to share as we are education and young people, supporting them. I wanted to acknowledge a few recent announcements. One is that Homies Empowerment Program. I see Dr. They will be serving breakfast starting this Monday out of the Homies Empowerment Freedom Store, 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. for Oakland youth. Also acknowledging that the Oakland Black College Expo is occurring Saturday, February 26th, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that is at the Marriott in downtown Oakland. The link to register is listed there as well. And there is an Experience UC Berkeley program that is being planned to introduce and ensure that our kids have an understanding and access and relative to the university that's right in their backyard. Wanted to lift up those announcements as we begin And the reason why I wanted to include a picture of my family here is because this is my why. This is why I am committed to making sure that our education system is serving all of our kids as well as it could, specifically those kids, Black and brown students who have historically been left out, underserved, and under-resourced when it comes to being, I will say, positioned for their full potential, to realize their full potential. I wanted to begin, if it were up to me, we would go around the room, and everyone, the Zoom room, we have about 67 participants on right now, and we would check in, see how everybody's doing. Unfortunately, we don't have the time, the space to really do that in a full, extensive way, but wanted to have this first initial exercise where if you log into the Poll Everywhere system, you can either text, follow the instructions to join by text or to join by web, entering Loren Taylor 767, and it'll serve up an activity where you can just add the words that indicate how you're feeling. And we wanted to create just a word cloud that showed how everybody is feeling. So if you can, log on to pollev.com, join by text, and I'm going to share, and I'm going to now share this word cloud. So as folks start to add in their words, we can see how that's shaping up. Again, pollev.com, enter Loren Taylor 767, and to join into this activity and share how you're feeling now, coming off of this week, entering this space that we are having this conversation, this much needed, critical conversation. I'm going to start sharing. So we've got words that are coming here. I see disgusted, frustrated, sad, appalled, great, angry, anxious, disrespected. Is everyone seeing the word cloud? I want to make sure that it's sharing. This is indicative of how much we have been going through, the challenges that hopeless, I see hopeless, racist, greed, sad. It's a huge range, but clearly there are these emotions, these things that we're struggling with, frustrated being one of the largest words, meaning we've gotten that much more emphasis on that, and that many more people have raised this. Disappointed, weary, tired, fatigued. So these are, I wanted to go through this exercise because I think this is indicative of where we collectively are, the challenges that we have faced. And this is exactly why it was important to me in responding to these, what I was hearing, what I am hearing on the ground, that we create the space to acknowledge, recognize what's here, have the opportunity for a lot of the questions that have been raised and people feeling as though they haven't been addressed to start to be addressed. Now, I want to recognize that we are not going to be able to address everything, all that's encapsulated in this word cloud, all that's not encapsulated in this word cloud, because we're limited to only one word. We're not going to address everything today in a 1.5 hour working session, but we wanted to start the process and create the space for doing so. And also allow questions to be asked and answered in a methodical way. So thank you for those who participated in this. I think it is important to do. Like to switch back to the slides that we're walking through. If you bear with me. So today's objectives, I think we covered this, but we want to have a conversation honestly about the grief, the trauma associated with the recent decision this past week to close and consolidate schools. I know it's something that we absolutely, from my perspective, should be avoiding at all costs. It does have trauma. We have been here before. I think many have acknowledged that in various forums, that this is something that we've unfortunately had to struggle with in the past. We want to try and channel the passion, the energy, the frustration, the desire for some direction into solutions that support and uplift impacted families, particularly our Black and Brown community, and in a way that helps us to avoid having this type of a week, these type of decisions being made in the future. We want to begin addressing some of the unanswered questions about the situation leading up to this past week's vote. And we want to explore immediate and long-term solutions for improving student outcomes at local, county, and the state level. There are solutions being explored. And it is about the students. One of the conversations that comes up often is how do we best support our students through all of this, what's going on? So I want to have that conversation as well. So with that, I want to thank those who are sort of on the line. Actually, before we move forward, I do want to just allow some space. We did get some questions in advance that we will be teeing up in this conversation. We do have the Q&A section that's open. That's open for us to use, those who are online, to add questions that we can vote on. You can upvote on the questions by clicking the little thumbs up to show that you think that question is one that should be elevated. Where I wanted to go is, I want it to be interactive, knowing that we're not going to allow and be able to have everybody share what's on their mind. But coming off of the word cloud, I'd like to create space for 2 or 3 folks who are willing to raise their hand and share what they're feeling, how that is reflected or not reflected in the word cloud that we have seen. And so with that, invite folks to raise their hand. We'll call on the first 2 or 3 folks and give you, we'll say 90 seconds to share what's on your mind. And I see 2 participants have their hands raised. I'll call on the first in the queue, allow you to speak and unmute yourself, Dr. Cesar Cruz.
Councilmember Taylor, it's an honor to be here with all of y'all. And so it's by the way, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
And so I apologize, I'm on the road because we're at a vaccine pod, and so that's why I'm not sharing my screen, and I'll be really brief. It's a combination of feelings. I'm feeling thankful for this gathering. Thank you for bringing us together. I'm really excited to hear from the principal from Parker. We're in solidarity with Parker Elementary and with all of our schools. And it's just disillusioned that we are in the situation that we're in, where oftentimes so many kids feel like, mommy, daddy, or are they going to close my school, or what's going to happen? And so the impact for kids, for families, for staff, and then to have a large list of schools going to close, and then they're not going to close. And now they've proposed 7 to 10, and they use the language of mergers as fancy language to close schools. It's just demoralizing, because we have such a beautiful city, such hardworking staff in Oakland Unified, and to make these decisions, It's just criminal. And not only that, we layer it with an economic pandemic, with a COVID pandemic. It's just too much. And on a personal note, you know, I have 3 kids. My wife and I have 3 kids in the district, all Oakland public schools. And so it hits home every which way. And then we were part of the small schools movement. We had East Oakland Community High School that was also shut down in the mid 2000s. And so the trauma is coming back. Having teachers have to go without eating, like this is what's happening in our society. You know, we're in one of the richest countries in the world, but we have never really valued education. It's not an Oakland problem. It's not a California problem. Just nationally, we've never really centered education. So the fact that Mia Bonta has the proposal that they have, I think is beautiful, and I'm looking forward to hear more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping it the comments tight. All great, valid points and things that we should absolutely be centering. Next in the queue, I see Upline Solutions LLC, Patricia Brooks. I'm going to allow you to now speak.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor, for holding this space and for recognizing the necessity for holding this space. Not only am I appalled and all of the words that are set forth in the word cloud, I think what's important, and we have to be real about this. I live in District 1. I don't have kids in Oakland Unified School District. However, my mother was an educator in Emory Unified School District.
The volume just went soft.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I am not a member, or did I attend Oakland Unified School District? But what I think everyone who's not even affected by the students, we have to call this for what it is. I'm the one who put black and brown on there. This would not happen. I'm just interested in the process. These people deserve process. In public schools, that's a partnership between the parents and the schools. There was no partnership here. And there may be data to support it, but no one had enough time to review the data. So the process stinks. And I think if these people were other than brown and black, and I think this is at the heart of the issue, this would not happen. It's to the least of us, the people who can be bullied. And I just think, in all fairness to those who voted for this, transparency is what your constituents expect of you. Transparency in government. And I just would like to know why this happens to brown and black all the time. Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Patricia. Your point around the process and the lack of partnership, or seemingly lack of partnership and transparency, absolutely something to uplift. I know that was, it is frustrating. It seems that we had little time to really process as a community, and centering black and brown students and families is one that we absolutely must continue to do, because we often bear the brunt. The one last question, I see Jamoke Hinton Hodge. Jamoke, I'm asking you to unmute now. You have 90 seconds.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to come together. I probably am on the other side of this one because I lived and worked and breathed and dedicated my life for 12 years to sit on the board and do good governance on behalf of our students of Oakland. And we actually have been a system that is failing. So when people talk about structural racism, or it's about black and brown children, if you look at urban school districts around the country, they are black and brown, Southeast Asian, Native American students. And yes, this is a system that absolutely does not serve our students. I want to challenge that for all the people that have said it came out of nowhere. That is not true. That is not true. We have been dealing with a structural deficit for years. We have been dealing with the issue of having to consolidate and right-size the school district for years. Yes, we kicked the can down the road. We have grand jury reports that simply said you cannot have small class sizes. You cannot pay an affordable living wage to teachers and have the number of schools. So we are willfully, in many ways, playing ignorant. We have not necessarily, even at this point, elected governance that takes this serious. We have gone about the business at this point of even bashing Black women professionals who know what they're doing. I don't take that a social worker is the person who knows how to do finance for the school district. So we have to have very clear data and understanding. I do appreciate that we are coming to this around what are our feelings and how does it is a shock to the system to have a school closed. And the last thing I would say is that the principals knew this. This is not something that people did not know. I was talking to the Prescott principal years ago about it. And the bottom line is our students, 4 out of 10 are only able to read. 3 out of 10 are doing mathematics and being able to compute. And at the end of the day, a school district should be about the education of children. We need to look at how we use our resources in order to do that well. Thanks for the opportunity and being here. And I'm appreciative that Linda Grant Dawson is here, who is a competent CBO for the school district.
Thank you for that, Jamoke. So I do see that we have, it looks like 2 other hands that are in the queue. For the sake of the time, the process, and moving forward, I'm gonna hold on those and we will call on you at the next opportunity. Next, I would like to shift, and I'm going to share, let me just shift the slide that's showing. Okay, so thank you, Jamoke, for your words. Thank you, Dr. Cruz. Thank you, Ms. Patricia Brooks, for sharing, and for everybody participating in that word cloud exercise. What we heard are exactly, this is the dialogue that we need to have. We do not move forward as a community with these tough, complex issues and challenges if we do not hear all of the voices and create space for acknowledging, hearing, and responding in a way that allows us to be focused on moving forward. And so that's exactly why we're here. We now want to call up Ms. Lisa Grant Dawson, who is our, I guess, OUSD budget administrator, to answer a few questions that have been raised that through the comments, but then also in feedback that we got earlier. I think one of the questions is, what is this structural deficit we've been talking about? What does that mean? What contributes to it? I think there's some enrollment questions that underlie that, but are there other contributors as well? There have been Q&A in terms of just how long this has been sort of an issue, and maybe other things to be addressed as well. And then we also have the Q&A. So I'll make sure that we lift up questions in the Q&A. But to begin, Ms. Grant Dawson, the floor is yours to just provide some background, initial responses.
Good morning. So I am here. It says that my video is unable to be shown.
I am going to fix that.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. Just made you a co-host, which should allow you to share your video.
Yeah, it still says I can't start the video because the host has stopped it. But I will start, and then you can let me know when it's available. So good morning. My name is Lisa Grant Dawson, and I am the district's chief business officer. So the areas of the responsibility of the chief business officer do include the district's budget and finance. Oh, there it is. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I appreciate this opportunity to present and to dialogue with you. And thank you so much, to our Councilman Taylor for the invitation and for the time. I do want to also be able to answer as many questions as possible and do look forward to any other opportunities. I think I have a few other colleagues that would be great to have on a forum like this. Because, you know, as I saw in the Wordle, the various areas of frustration and concern about process and timeline, we can concur with in so many different ways. I think this conversation, as we heard, a past school board member, Haj speak to, was that this has been a long-standing systemic conversation. And perhaps in the community, everyone is not aligned to the conversation in real time. I shared, a colleague shared with me years ago, just looking throughout the nation, when there's a crisis that happens, especially a natural disaster or other circumstance, for us, it may be fires, you know when things are becoming more normal when schools reopen. Schools being open is a signal that things are coming together when we are able to have our children assembled together for the process of their learning and education. And our schools have been open, yet we've had various challenges that I think during this time that we're really digging out and really coming from under to really discuss out loud. I think that there's been challenges with many of the areas of communication that we've had along the way. And since I've been in the district, which was during the pandemic when I came in April of 2020, a large part of what I was hearing from the community was, and the board members, was information that wasn't necessarily stratified in a way for us to understand. And so let me share what has become, let's see, move this. Okay, are you able to see the slide?
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let me know if I need to make it bigger. So one of the key areas of discussion has been the district has changed in its size. And that size, as far as what we commonly start with enrollment, that's connected to where the city's population, the city and the community that we serve is changing. And those demographics from where you will hear people, and the data shows that we once were a 50,000 plus enrolled school district, that the district at its height was one of the largest school districts in the state of California. And that has changed over time. Those who have been long-term residents know and realize there have been transitions of families out of the Bay Area, out of Oakland specifically, to other cities in the community where either A, their jobs moved them to. If you lived in California long enough, we remember the different exoduses when AT&T and the Bells left the Bay Area to go to Georgia and other cities. We remember that exodus into Nevada, but we also remember when our families began moving to the Sacramento area, to the Valeos, to the Fairfield. I grew up in Vallejo, and even in Vallejo, we saw this exodus to to Sacramento, Elk Grove, and other areas that were growing and where housing and jobs were available. And so that's happened to Oakland also. And so we've shared this, and though yes, the district has over time showed its enrollment projections, what we haven't talked about as much, and what I was not hearing and begin to show more, is also our attendance. So enrollment is how we plan. And for each school, we look at the enrollment population at each particular school and also district-wide. Now in Oakland, we have some unique ways in which we also manage enrollment because we have an enrollment policy that is a very open policy, and it allows for students to transfer out of their neighborhood school and either get on a waiting list or use other mechanisms to enroll into a school which the family chooses. That's a great novel opportunity. Many districts have it. What I've shared is that the impact of that, and again, I'm coming in on, the 18th of the 20 years of history that the district has been under state receivership. What that has done is it has created, I think, an unintended consequence where many of our neighborhood schools have seen this mass erosion of students. So when you're talking to and appreciate, and was able to meet with our Parker principal, Ms. Colbert, this week, when you look at schools like Prescott or Parker or Burkhalter or other schools, you're seeing this shift, not only in what may be happening with the neighborhood that again may be aging and less families are able to afford to live or move in that area, but you also have a compounded effect of our enrollment policy, because we do have the data to show that there are more students that live in the areas in which many of the schools that have been on this list, and I would concur, of schools has existed for many years. And so we've seen this exodus where families are making a choice to leave their neighborhood schools, and or yes, we agree, have chosen to go to other academic entities such as charter schools, or perhaps, if possible, parochial schools or out of the city. Because of that, we earn our revenue. The primary source of our revenue is not based on our enrollment, it's based on our attendance. So the other side of that is that we're planning for more students, but the history of our district trend is that we've had only a 94% in attendance factor. So the gap between historically how we plan, which means we're staffing at that level, we're allocating at that level, and we're providing the resources at the high level, but the number of students that have attended on average has been 94%. We are beginning to see that 94% grow. And so what we are facing is that when the pandemic occurred, right, which would have been in the 2021 year, the 1920 year, excuse me, we began to see a gap. And the reason why you don't see that gap here is because the state allowed us to use our prior year ADA to fund us. So during this period of time, we had several charter schools that closed. And so with that, then the enrollment begins to shift back to the district. So otherwise, it would have been at this number. And as you can see, the prior year, the number was actually lower. This was during a strike year. So I would call that as far as a data component, it was an anomaly, because the attendance would have been a little bit higher had that not occurred. That all being said,
Ms. Grant Dawson, can I
yes,
interrupt you really quickly?
you can.
My screen is showing a box over the top right of your presentation.
Okay, better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so when we're looking at the 2021 year, this is the year that the state began to say, and we already had an educational code that says, if you are declining enrollment district, your enrollment is declining, you can use your prior year. I'm setting this context for those who have not heard this portion of the presentation to say the pandemic did accelerate our decline. And that acceleration of the decline, without us having any visibility of a change in legislation, would begin to tell us we're going to see a lower attendance number that was exacerbated by the pandemic, but was definitely already occurring. So back to, there was a trend of occurrence. And one of the questions that I'm understanding has been raised is, are there other options? Absolutely. During this year, we looked at, in the last year, what about our attendance? What are our attendance strategies? How are we beginning to improve the number of students that we plan for and then being able to attend school? This would have been pre-pandemic, this data would have told us that. And then yes, during the pandemic, we understand many of the facets that have not only changed, but we also are seeing an additional exodus of families, not only in California, again in the Bay Area, and then nationwide, we're seeing this movement due to the pandemic of people being able to move and or needing to relocate due to job loss, where other families may be situated if that's their circumstance, or by choice. If I can now work remotely and live and move it to Texas or move to another area where the economics, my political affiliation, or where I've just always wanted to live affords me that, we are seeing that transition also in our enrollment. So the less students that we have, the less resources that we have. And that is one of the main correlations to why school closures, because our neighborhoods don't look the same and we don't have the same number of students that we're serving. That includes choice on the front end as far as where people are living or able to live, and then choice where my children are going to school. So this slide also shows you that, our lower birth rates, because we do look at birth rates, which again is a key indicator for us for enrollment. And then I've shared some of the other components that really drive this area. So want to pause there. Councilman Taylor, don't know if you want to entertain Q&A in between, but this was a main point, and this presentation can be found on the school district's website. I will also put a link to it in the chat if that's preferred, so that people can have access to it.
I apologize. I did just get a note as well. Ms. Grant Dawson, are you able to put this slide into presentation view?
I can.
Yeah.
So let's see if it'll show better. Let me move these out of the way. Okay, did it flip?
We haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
It's still showing the window with the navigation panel on the left.
Better?
There you go. There you go. That's better.
Okay. Sorry, the two screens are always, okay, there we go. And then again,
Maybe it may be zooming out so we can see the full slide.
There you go. And then let me grab the link also, so I can put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you for that.
Welcome.
And now may be a good time to just sort of tee up some of the questions that have been raised.
Okay.
If you're good. So one of the questions that I hear is, and thank you for emphasizing the enrollment and the attendance piece. One of the statements made, I think, is agreeing with you. It said that we should not have gone back to, we should have continued relying on the prior year's attendance numbers instead of sort of losing that at the state level. I think that was one comment that was made. We also see, let's see, there are clear demands from organizers on the ground, one being to push the state to lift the predatory $100 million loan. How will the city support folks on the ground to fight the state and get these demands met? So I know this is one that you haven't necessarily talked about, but aspect of the loan and the fact that we owe, I believe it's somewhere around $30 million still back to the state. Is that something that you can address? And I can,
yeah. So that is another good factor back to the sum of all parts and the district's goals to not only gain local control, right? Because a large part of this backdrop is about Oakland. We've watched you for 20 years and we've given you the opportunity for 20 plus years to correct and to get back on track so that you're a sustainable school district. There is a lot of deep sighs and references that I would say when I was in other school districts, you'd hear, and again, for those who know my history, I've been to 4 of the 5 most challenged school districts in Northern California, by choice. And a large part of that is, people looking from the outside in saying, yeah, they can't do it. They're not able to do it. The state's going to take over again. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here. to give the community the opportunity to do so. And we recognize that in these moments, it doesn't feel that way. But the opportunity as far as the loan, what surprised me most coming into the district was that the loan wasn't part of the district's overall strategy for achieving local control. So an example of that would be, and there are so many different competing events, what you can do when you have a state loan with your assets is different than when you're not under state control. And I recognize that the district didn't want to, for instance, sell any of its assets. It's preferred to, and we've just reached this place recently of leasing various properties, which may not afford you and don't afford you the same level of leverage to have paid the loan off earlier, but that wasn't in the strong strategy, if you will, to be able to navigate through that. The components of paying the loan off early is structured on, it's a bond. And so the bond has to be paid off over time. And the reason why is because those who invested in it want their full return. But then there was a portion of the loan that the state had and the district could have paid off early. With all of the different components, it just wasn't part of the key strategy. So it was raised actually as far as the loan payment after I came, because one portion of the loan does end in 2023. So for me, it was a stay focused. This portion of the loan is going to come off. We'll be making our last payment within a couple of years. So what we want to do is not only strategize the use of that, essentially that cash coming back into the district, but also how do we continue to level set? More recently, there has been a board resolution to pay the state loan off earlier. We've also articulated that it's not just we've made our last payment, because we're in the period where the bonds are what's called callable, meaning I will correlate this to your car payment. When you're close to your car payment being complete, you may ask for a payoff. That payoff would therefore give you the opportunity to in cash, pay your car off early and avoid additional interest. Very similar in this bond structure. And so we have that as a resolution now to utilize our one-time resources to do so. But we still have to pass a financial assessment audit. So with that being said, there's still more work. It's not just forgive and pay the loan off. They're likely still going to require us to go through that financial audit. Why? Because they want to make sure that the district is truly sustainable. And so that is the work that we're striving to do, and understanding that to have 81 school sites where over time the district has made various reductions. These reductions in the ask has been, please make the reductions as far away from the classroom as possible. We understand that. And we've done that. And that's why I've also shared that with a district of 4,500 employees that we pay monthly, and this district twice a month, there are 7 employees in payroll, 7. You can do that math, 4,500 divided by 7, and then divide that by 12. The number of just regular payrolls that we do, our payroll monthly is $47 million. We have 12 people to manage the gardening of 81 school sites, because over time we've leaned out on many of those positions because they're, they're ancillary, they're support positions, but it's where the district has had to go in certain places that we have really imbalanced the staffing in many different areas. And what that does is it also causes us more compliance constraints. So another big area of focus for the district has been its audits, and very strongly put, why do we have the audit findings? So this is all so many different pieces of one conversation. I do hope that folks are able to walk away with, we may be talking about the school closures, but it's a component of how we're trying to solve, though not preferred, a larger area as far as sustainability and the structural deficit of the district.
Thank you for that response, Ms. Dawson. So I'm hearing that there are a number of areas that we are pushing to make sure that we're exhausting as many possibilities that can be done prior to the conversation around closing schools. You mentioned, some aspects of paying off the bond early with one-time money that would allow for a structural deficit to come back in balance. I heard the focus on reducing as much as possible in the non-classroom functions, and as you said, leaning out those operations. Thanks for providing that level of detail. I think when we entered this conversation, we knew we weren't going to be able to go as deep as we want to or comprehensively in this time, but definitely tee up sort of future conversations as well. I'm going to look to my team to see what other sort of questions should be lifted up. I know that we were, in terms of voting on some of those and
Yeah.
upvoting. Go ahead, Kiana.
And so one of the questions from Mr. Omalade stated, why the urgency? Why can't we wait a year? Why no community engagement?
Great question. The district did have and had been developing for the last several years a blueprint plan and a citywide plan to address the number of schools in various areas of the district's sustainability, not only to improve the academic quality and achievement, but access and equity components. There were so many different areas, again, in that multi-layered strategy. And so with that, one of them, was school closure. So there was a initiative with schools listed. It was a cohort 3. So it was the third round of cohort of schools that were scheduled for merger, consolidation, and or closure. So the board decided not to move forward in that direction. And I would say, to answer your question about the acceleration of it coming back, this is where that oversight, where not only the state, but the county and also the fiscal crisis management and assistant team, it's Saturday. So if I can paraphrase it in a way, see, Oakland, we told you, we knew you weren't going to do it. We placed it in the legislation that you need to be able to reduce your footprint so that you can operationally sustain yourself better. And you didn't do it. And so with that being said, stronger letters began to come to the district. And oh, by the way, 3 years ago, when we put in new legislation for additional resources for Oakland Unified School District specifically, in addition to 2 other districts, in the budget trailer bill legislation, there was additional resources for the district. The first year, the district received $500,000. The second year, we received $16 million. This third year, and again, it's a calculation based on where the district's deficits are, we were scheduled to receive $10 million. So when the response was, and so by the way, since you didn't clear this hurdle, and it was in the legislation that you needed to close and or consolidate, merge, we don't care what it is, but you need to reduce your footprint and become more efficient, you will not receive the $10 million allocation. That is the Assembly Bill 1840 that you've heard perhaps referenced, AB 1840. That's one of the significant reasons for the review of school closures again, because that lost opportunity, as you've heard the board members who authored and or represented the resolution to place school closures back on the list, would be a missed opportunity financially for the district, because it does allow us to have additional resources to reset. The timing was because this was supposed to be scheduled, including when we did the cohort 3 resolution for a 22-23 fiscal year change. So that is the history. We've placed, again, those letters for those that were interested on our website as well. But that was a large, significant reason for resetting and returning back to this conversation within months of the board agreeing not to do so.
Thank you for that that response. And that also answers another question that was asked, really around this urgency And I think one question that often comes up is how, and I'm just going to read directly from Stephanie Berger. We understand the numbers. What we're not talking about is the numbers are a result of district decisions, opening charters, underpaying teachers, so quality of education is lower than other districts, high consultancy fees, et cetera. What I want to know is how the district is going to accept this responsibility and make changes that support students, not hold them accountable for the mistakes of the adults in power. So I wanted to read that because I think that reflects what a lot of folks have, recognizing that you are the chief budget officer. You may not be able to answer all things about the district, but I didn't want that to go unstated because I think that summarizes some of what folks are feeling as well. Any things to
Yes,
share?
and there was a lot there, so I want to make sure. Is it in the Q&A?
Looks like I lost it in the Q&A.
Oh, okay.
It's in the answered portion of the Q&A.
Okay. Okay, so I can't. Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, Stephanie Berger came in at 10:25 a.m.
Okay, just because there were so many. Thank you, Ms. Berger, for the question. Good points. I didn't want to miss 10:25. I'm almost there.
No, I'm not seeing it.
Oh,
I also uplifted it in our host and panel.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Okay, can you read the elements?
I'll reread it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we understand the numbers. What we're not talking about is the numbers are a result of district decisions, prior district decisions. And then in parentheses, opening charters, underpaying teachers, so quality of education is lower than other districts, high consultancy fees, et cetera.
Okay, so let me pause there. So thank you for that question in that context. So again, back to listening to many of the concerns. So I'll start with consultancy. So again, on the district's website, and I'll make sure I could put that link on the landing page, we did review, which had been done before, the percentage of expenses that the district spends on consultancy. So let me put that in context. And the reason why we developed this graphic, and I think my colleague, Mr. Christmas, is on, that narrative about the expenditures of consultancies exists in two places. So there's the central office, and then there are school sites. So what you will see on that document, and if you go under the school district and under business services, there's a fiscal sustainability and fiscal vitality page. We have a graphic that shows the history of the expenditures of consultants, and the district has responded and reduced the amount of consultants that it utilizes. Do want to make sure that the community understands also, when we say consultants, that also includes many local, and you can see the names of the vendors, local organizations that the district works with and that work in partnership with the district that school sites select as part of their strategies, as well as the district centrally with memorandums of understanding or other interagency agreements. So I think I want to point the community to that area because it does show a stark decline in the reductions of expenditures. So that is one way that the district has made some shifts there. As it relates to paying for teachers, definitely agree. We also have some additional information that again is on that same space. And if Mr. Christmas is on the call, if you can put those links in, that would be helpful for the community to go to. That Commissioner Councilman Taylor, we can come back to all by itself, because the district's philosophy, and I heard another community member speak to the small schools movement, as well as the community schools component. One of the things that I will say in looking at that implementation was we adopted the philosophy, but we didn't set parameters about what that looked like. And so we do have very small average class sizes. And when we say average, that's by school, that's district-wide. Having more teachers or having more additional certificated support was our strategy of how we were going to improve quality in education. I cannot say that that strategy by itself, which seems to be where we've invested a lot of resources, has been the key strategy to drive that quality, the equity, and those initiatives up. So one can also say, well, it's also because of the levels of salaries that we have because they're too low. We agree. So the work is creating the balance where we're able to increase our salaries, but we also have to decrease expenditures elsewhere. And our number one expenditure as a school district is always going to be people. What we've also shared is that our average salary to total expenditures was 85%, which is pretty average for a district. It has now exceeded 85%, and we're closer to 90%, which means we spend 90% of our expenditures on staffing. So that also shows how we reduce expenditures in other places, but what we can't keep up with without having more revenue. So let's get back to attendance that drives revenue. And enrollment, which with the correlating attendance, what we can't get past is the cost of retirement. The cost of salaries is growing faster, and we need more revenue to create. And if we're still on this slide, we need more revenue to narrow this gap, because we can't plan for 36,700 students if we can't pay for 36,700 students. And so I think the last part is that, so just want to point out, we have made great progress. And one of the other reasons as a strategy, school closures to get that yield between our revenue and expense, everything that we just reduced, you may have heard that the district made $40 million worth of reductions and or shifting expenditures that shouldn't be in our base general fund and into other resources, was designed to help support us being able to improve our salaries. So we are doing all of that at the same time, but I need 3 years worth of sustainability. 2020, 21, 22, we've been able to sustain it. Yes, we've used some one-time resources to support that. 22, 23, we've made the plans to sustain 22, 23, but 23, 24, we've not cleared that hurdle, because we also know that everything that we're doing now with agreements is only taking us through 22, 23, and we're not prepared for 23, 24. So with that, hoping that that helps, but definitely welcome coming back to that conversation in and of itself. And another slide that we have here, which begins to talk about that, but I'll pause, is what the district's financial structure looks like in summary, just looking at the unrestricted general fund. But I can pause here, Councilmember Taylor, for more questions, and then perhaps navigate into this part.
Thank you. I did want to jump to a couple slides. We invited and had initially confirmed that Senators Portantino and Assemblymember Bonta would be able to join us, but in the last 24 hours, they alerted us that they would be unable to join. But I did want to share a couple slides that reflect work that they are doing to address what we just talked about. One of the questions in the Q&A was around what systemic changes are being proposed to address this and help put not only our schools, but more specifically our students on a path to greater success. And so this first slide I wanted to share is a summary of SB 830. I think someone in the Q&A mentioned it as well. SB 830 is a bill that is being brought forward by Senator Portantino out of Southern California. Our own Assemblymember Mia Bonta is a co-author, and sponsors include Los Angeles Unified School District, the School Employees Association for the state, and most recently this past week, Superintendent Tony Thurman joined as a co-sponsor. What it does is it defines, as opposed to relying on strictly attendance to determine our to determine the funding that comes to our school district, which is, I think there's a statement that California is one of only 6 states that relies exclusively on attendance as opposed to enrollment. It defines this term average daily membership, which focuses on the enrollment for the district. And if it is approved, it would start the 2023 to 24 fiscal year for the state. And it requires that school districts receive supplemental dollars, the difference between the dollars they would get on a enrollment-based formula and the dollars that they have been historically getting and would get under the attendance-based formula. Recognizing that I think what we heard was that if we have a 94% attendance rate versus our enrollment, then that's 6% that we're not able to, that we have to plan for, but we're not able to actually, have in terms of resources to support the school, the district, and everything that's going on. And so the bill is meant to identify that gap between membership or enrollment and attendance dollars that would be coming our way. And it prescribes a way for the school district to get those dollars in order to actually use it and activate it to improve the education of the school. So this is a bill that's working through the Senate. I'm glad that our local representatives are joining others to advocate for it. And it is expected to bring significant additional dollars to school districts across the state, OUSD being one of those. So I did want to address that aspect of the attendance formula that Ms. Grant Dawson mentioned. And this is something that I am advocating for. We on the city council will have a resolution before us this Tuesday's council meeting, basically endorsing and supporting a move towards an enrollment-based funding formula, and our support for that and advocating that our state leaders do as well. The next thing, and this is another bill that's working its way through, Assembly Bill 1912. This was introduced by our representative Assembly Member Mia Bonta just this past week. And this is intended on addressing that response relative to urgency. I think what Ms. Grant Dawson said was that part of the reason for the urgency is that there's $10 million that in the past, the 2021 Budget Act for the state that was tied to forward progress being made by the school district in its consolidation plan. This is something that was part of the state budget passed in June. It had these requirements in order to receive the $10 million. And the bill that Assembly Member Bonta is lifting up is attempting to decouple the $10 million from the school closure plan. It is something that would be voted on, I think at the earliest it would be at the end of the school year, unfortunately though. So that is an attempt to also create some freedom or I will say, flexibility for our school district. And so I did want to lift up those two things that are happening directly in response. In these two slides that you saw, we have the QR code that you can scan in order to see the legislative text, some additional information and details, and you can reach out to the authors' offices to learn more. So I wanted to share that since we were since that was relevant to what Ms. Grant Dawson was bringing forward. There are other Q&A, but I know that we also wanted today to address what is happening on the ground with particular schools and the families, the parents, the students, and the families. And I do want to, we do have Ms. Raquel Colbert, the principal from Parker Elementary, which has been going through, I think what Dr. Cesar Cruz described as this yo-yo effect of we're closing, we're not closing, and we know how that, at least the vote transpired this past week. So Ms. Colbert, a lot of people are concerned about the families, the impact on the families, the students, as I know you are hearing on the ground, interacting with the parents, the students, everyone on a regular basis. Maybe you can just share a little bit about what you're hearing, experiencing, the voice of the families. There was a comment that said we want to, hear from families as well. So we want to lift up those. I will be sort of combing through to lift up those comments and then see if we may have some families that want to share their thoughts by raising their hands in the participant queue as well. But Ms. Colbert, please, if you don't mind, I will stop sharing so that you can be seen.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Councilmember Taylor, Ms. Lisa Grand Dawson, the community. I'm Raquel Colbert, a proud principal of Park Elementary and Middle School. This is my 4th year as a principal there. This is my 22nd year as an educator, 11 years in Oakland Unified. So Councilmember, you opened up with your why, and I appreciate that. So I would like to lift up my why as well. So I have a photo to share as well, and it's the photo behind me. It's a photo of Parker Elementary and Middle School and our beautiful grounds. And my why pretty much has to do with everything and everyone that's in that building. All of our students, our wonderful staff. That's why I'm here. I'm a product of East Oakland as well. And it's just been a gift to serve as a principal at the school. Just want to lift up, I know there's been some perceptions about Parker, and part of the reason why I think we landed on that list and was the Soul School, comprehensive school that was chosen to be closed. But I just want to clear up some perceptions. And also I'd like to actually invite our 200 plus students and families that live in our neighborhood. I'd like to welcome you back to Parker. Parker can operate as a large school. It can operate as a small school efficiently and effectively. I invite those community members to come and schedule a tour at Parker, to actually come into the building to see what actually happens at our school. And hopefully we can get some of those families back at our school and benefiting from the wonderful staff and the 100-year history of being a public school education institution and resource hub for families in the neighborhood. So speaking of the neighborhood, most of our students actually live in the neighborhood. They walk to school. They take short car rides to school. Sure, the neighborhood has experienced some challenges over the last 20 plus years. And we talked about enrollment, ebbs and flows in enrollment, et cetera. And that's certainly true. But I think some of the perceptions that have been out there for years still stick. And they're just not accurate right now. That's why I'm inviting the community to come to the school and see how wonderful our staff is. Parker actually has an individualized approach to all of our students. Sure, there's a depth of needs in the community, but we know each and every one of our students, each and one of every family, we meet them where they are, whether it's an academic need, whether it's a social emotional need, whether it's just being a resource hub in the community to serve our families. Parker has a history of staff who stay at the school for years, who are the backbone of the school, who have this historical perspective, who know the families, their stories, and we're able to serve the families in that way. So I just wanted to make sure that the community knew that we're here to serve them, and we'd love to welcome them all back. At least give us an opportunity to come and do a tour. We've actually recently been partnering with our neighborhood association groups who have been around the neighborhood for years, and actually they reached out over the summer. We've been meeting every single month to partner and to strategize. How can we improve the neighborhood, the safety of the neighborhood? How can we improve the school, which we know is the center of the neighborhood, again, for over 100 years. So I just wanted to make sure, just lift that up, number one, and put that invitation out there as well. So in the cloud that you kind of did the warm up with this morning, for sure, the whole community, we're experiencing a whole spectrum, of emotions, for sure, most definitely. At any point in time, we might be experiencing one, two, or all of them. I mean, this is devastating. This is devastating for us, for our community, for our students. It's terrible. Parker is needed in the community. There is a benefit to small schools as well, even though we can't operate efficiently as a larger school, but there's a benefit to having small schools in the community. I talked about this individualized approach. I talked about students who actually need a smaller environment. We have a thriving middle school program, which is really the only K-8, we're the only K-8 option in East Oakland. And we have students that have been with us since kindergarten who are promoting now. Imagine the beauty of being able to nurture and teach and contribute to the growth of a student for 8 years, instead of them just leaving as a 5th grader, you know, on the verge of young adulthood and some really challenging, developmentally a challenging time in their lives. We're able to wrap around, again, with that individualized approach. And that is certainly what we do. Students are learning at Parker. Students are learning to read at Parker. We have a thriving early literacy program with excellent instructional coaches and early literacy tutors. We have a full wraparound approach to all of our students because we know the depth of needs in the community. It's not just academic, obviously, but the conditions for learning have to be established first. Our students come with a lot of trauma. The community itself has experienced a lot of trauma, and we understand that. And we know that impacts learning and impacts the students, just their state of being and readiness for learning. So we have a full service community school with social workers, with therapists, with counselors, food services, just anything you can imagine. Pretty much Parker provides and serves our community. And that was especially evident during the pandemic when we went on distance learning for 1.5 years. There was just a huge need and our community was devastated, but Parker was the hub and a resource hub for resources for our families. We were open every month, providing headphones and laptops and school materials, whiteboards, anything our students needed. Our social worker and our counselors were doing home visits, checking on our students. We held monthly community engagement meetings, awarding our students and congratulating them for logging on every day. So again, Parker has served a huge part of the community, and we're definitely benefiting the community, and Parker needs to stay in the community. It does not need to be closed. And that's how most of us feel in the community. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Colbert. I want to just lift you up and thank you for your leadership at Parker, championing the cause of our families, our students. Clearly, the work that you have been doing at Parker on behalf of our children and their families has been critical and sorely needed. I know that we have worked together on some of those neighborhood issues and opportunities that you have lifted up, connecting with the neighbors who see the value and the benefit of a thriving school in their neighborhood for a whole number of reasons, whole plethora of reasons. So thank you for that and sharing the true treasure that we have had with Parker and its history. One of the there are questions here related to some of the families, hearing from the families. I'm not quite sure if we have anyone who is a family member from Parker who's on the line and able and prepared to speak. I see a few hands that are raised. Also, I believe that we have, I did want to acknowledge that we did invite folks from the teacher community as well, a representative from the Reparations for Black Students group who were unable to join us today. But I believe that these are the questions that need to be lifted up, asked, evaluated, and make sure that we are having this discussion. One question that was raised consistently in the chat is related to how these schools were selected or chosen. I'm not sure that's as clear. Ms. Grant Dawson, is that something that you can provide some answers as to the criteria by which different schools were evaluated for the initial list? I know that the board made some decisions I guess on Tuesday as far as changing that list, and I'm not quite sure if you can speak to that, but the initial list, perhaps the criteria and what was used.
So thank you for that question. The initial list, so also on the district's website is a blueprint link. So again, this list of schools or the list of schools has existed for quite some time. I know there's been some modifications to the strategies about, how to support each individual school, as well as there were also moments where there was a charter closing and an opportunity that wasn't on the list for schools to merge, like Roses and Concrete, for instance. That list has existed. So there's been many schools that have had this start-stop, which I think is the other part of the do different, of not continuing to have this start-stop and really wanting to develop some better solutions. And so how the list was presented was the list that was growing over time and was basically a list of different cohorts and combinations of schools. How the final list was determined, again, the district staff is watching the deliberation in real time along with the community. So based on the recommendations, by the board members and the different rationale provided, we can't speak to the why other than what was presented. So that wasn't necessarily something that we contribute to. It is something that then we respond to in our responsibility to execute the resolution as stated.
See, one of the questions about that's lifted up, why are small classrooms and quality adult relationships not a point of interest for OUSD when it comes to keeping Parker School open? This community needs a school like this to assist with combating the things in the community. Having a space like Parker can be the difference in these students' lives. Another question was raised, where will Parker children go to school? Recognizing that many are from the neighborhood. Another question is related to just Parker closing. Let's see. I'm just reading this directly. I'm not understanding the board thinking Parker is under-resourced when I've toured the classrooms, and they are not. And one of the questions that was raised to me earlier is there an enrollment target like that would allow Parker to stay off the list or be off the list? Like if they had a certain number of students that it would change this formula? Is it a matter of just the community and others being that much more laser focused on enrollment and advertising, like to get that those enrollment numbers up?
So this is, I think, another area that I've been able to step into with all the different components that have happened. So there was also something that was raised during this period of time back to our implementation, as I said, of small schools and community schools. Nothing wrong with that. The question is, and what I raised when I first arrived is, you can't afford to do for all your schools to look like that. But there is a way for you to buy either network or by area to provide those offerings. And I think that is a school district's responsibility to provide an array of offerings, but we have to be able to sustain them. So for instance, I'm having a school that is less than 200, and for some of our schools, less than 100 students is not sustainable. So by the very measure of how we staff or allocate, either by student, if you start by student, and then you look at need, we would not have enough resources to do that. And that's what pulls resources from other schools or other places. Our goal is to reset. Very happy for the community to help us reset. But you heard Ms. Colbert say something that was really important, and we've talked about this. It's also the perceptions about different schools, and back to where people have made choices over time. So when you ask the question, is there an enrollment? A elementary school, for it to be sustainable by average, is about 450 students. Now that currently is not Oakland's target enrollment for an elementary school or a K-8 school. And so that's something that I think we need to go back to, because some years ago there was a target number set for what each school should look like. It's not just the sustainability, it's also that history of looking at what an elementary school should look like, and then the elementary school size, and then the high school size. So I would say that's an area that we're walking back into because it's not set appropriately. But I would say that any school that's below 200, it's going to be a significant challenge, and it will impact a Parker as it relates to the resources that we can allocate. The perceptions will impact a Parker when and I've said this before and I'll say it out loud, I believe, so I'm staying within my profession, but then saying a little personal, professional analysis of what I've seen, that we've unintentionally marketed that better is outside of your neighborhood. And I would just say, you know, as a professional in school districts, I think a school district's premise should be quality can be at all schools, not just some. So I'm still learning how to navigate through that and help with the strategy build about that. But that is a very strong data suite that has existed over time, that quality is someplace else. And I think for Parker, for Prescott, for other school districts where there are students in the community, but they've made choices to go to other schools, it presents a very unique challenge. And so also back to the city components of what's happening in different neighborhoods, that also of course is going to impact it if the neighborhood family structures are declining as well, and how we support that. But I do believe that there's a way for us to have small schools in education. There is a necessary small school component that as a theory meant that if you were, say, in a rural or other areas where you have a clustering of families and that school is going to necessarily be small, there's additional funding that comes with that. Well, we could build an infrastructure that way, but we have to set a parameter that's reasonable for us to be consistent with. So if that number is, we can have X number of small schools that are 250 that support families that would prefer a smaller structure. How do we build that and then have elementary schools that, you know, are of that larger size? And so those are the areas that if people are asking, are there other ways? Yes, I as an individual don't drive all of those, you know, strategies, but definitely we recommend, and we're digging in our data differently to make those recommendations to see how we can balance the structure better.
Thank you for that. I see a question that was raised in to the hosts in the chat. It mentions La Escuelita, a middle school that is fully enrolled with a waiting list, is one of the schools that was on the list. I think that also relates to Parker, which is a middle school as well as an elementary school. And I'm curious if you wanted to just address, I know that there are a few middle schools or K-8 schools on the list that were sort of the middle school portion of it was sort of looked at or pulled out, or that was part of the strategy. Is there any comment that you have on that whole K-8 model? Is that where the district is now seeing that it needs to go away from and no longer have a, like, what is that, the implication there?
So the question about the schools and the implication about the middle school program, the 6-8 program was distinctly a question about what we weren't seeing in that initiative and what the district thought should change. I think that if we can come back with the structure pieces, I think that would be appropriate because it is multifaceted.
Yeah.
And I do think it would give a better option for us to address that whole cadre of strategy, grade spans, and what we're seeing as it relates to why certain schools were placed.
Yeah, because I see in the chat that Greenleaf, we've got other K-8 schools, and so we knew that we weren't going to cover everything. The whole structure piece, I think, is definitely one for an upcoming conversation relative to which of the schools 6 through 8 programs in a K-8 are lifted up and why. I think that's a question that, you know, many people are concerned about as well in terms of the targeting. I see Ms. Colbert, you want to jump back in, please.
I actually just wanted to add as what else, something else that's contributing to the depletion of our enrollment. Not only is it our neighborhood babies are choosing charter schools and private schools, but just this threat of closure over the last 12 years or so, that has been put upon Parker, actually doesn't make it, as an attractive school site because of the threat of closure. So every time this comes up, Parker loses 20% of our students every year. Every year we lose 20% of our students due to this threat. Who wants to enroll in a school that's possibly closing? And it actually has impacted somewhat our ability to attract, high quality staff. And we have an excellent staff, but of course we want to grow and continue to attract, awesome teachers and staff. But again, who wants to commit to a school site that's going to be closed? So that has also impacted our enrollment. And with regards to, why we're on the list, again, I don't have all the answers, but I do know Parker historically has been a community that does not have the loudest voice. Now, we have a lot of perseverance and resilience now, but they're not the loudest voice. They don't have the most agency, the most advocacy. And if you notice at the board meetings, those school sites that have that voice from the parents, that voice from the students, from all over, those schools aren't on the list any longer. So I think there are multiple factors that contribute to our declining enrollment.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. Want to uplift the, I will say, just the agency piece that you brought up. And I know that that's one thing that you've been building is trying to create more engagement with the families, the parents, the activation as well. So thank you for that. I am going to, let's see, one of the questions that has come up is how we, those on the line, can help, what they could do, should do at this point to address these challenges. Clearly, there are some things that are in the school board's sort of purview. And Ms. Grant Dawson, thank you for serving as a representative, even though you're not in leadership of all of these areas of decision making, but being able to reflect what the conversation has been and what has gone on into this. But the community, part of why we wanted to have this was because folks have this energy, this emotion. They want to be able to support in a way that is productive in moving us forward. And so wanted to sort of lift that up, I guess, first to you, Ms. Colbert. I know that you're also sort of formulating with the district a plan for supporting the families, but what could they do? What could folks do in supporting? What should they be advocating for? What should, and if they have their time, money, resources, what have you? What are some of the opportunities?
Well, one thing I know Ms. Grant Dawson mentioned is just like the marketing and recruitment for our schools. All of our schools should have, full backing district support to market as, hey, attend your neighborhood school. It's a great school because of A, B, C, and D. Schedule a tour at your neighborhood school. It shouldn't be the responsibility of the school site, that we already have our, exhaustive, list just trying to operate and run our schools to do marketing and to do recruitment as well. Now we've done it though, because, we want to build our enrollment. We have a virtual school tour, we have slides, we have it advertised on YouTube, et cetera. But I think that would help as well, just kind of rebranding some of these kind of disenfranchised schools that has historically been under enrolled and have had reputations that have stuck for years that are no longer valid or applicable. That's one thing. And then, of course, not necessarily funding the schools based on a number. Really, there should be an individualized approach to funding schools as well, in my opinion. I've worked at large schools. I've had 1,600 students, but now I have started out with 318 4 years ago. Now I'm down to 225 students due to COVID. Started out at 260 students. But funding should be dependent on the depth of needs of the students and the population, not just the number. So my students in one district, when I had 1,000 students, had a whole set of needs, whole spectrum of needs, than let's say my 300 students at Parker. So again, that individualized approach to the needs of the community and the actual students, I think would help.
Thank you for that.
Can I speak? Can I jump in and just respond to that? So, back to what we are addressing in with the district staff as well as with the board, and why when I referenced we had to step back and walk through a lot of the basics, not only how we're funded, but where money should be sourced. We do earn additional resources, as Ms. Colbert said, for students in need, but perhaps the way, not perhaps, the way that we've allocated it, or the way that we've come up with the ways to allocate it, and the number of schools and the way that it's spread has created a challenge. And that's been another thing that we've been, I'll say, teaching and then reteaching, because it's how to build a different model in doing so. You know, and I also saw, you know, a comment about, you know, the number of school, the size of a school. The size of a school starts with how you construct it, right? Based on the need in the neighborhood. And then from there, it's how are we maximizing that school size? So there's other components as far as the facility and the use that was envisioned when it was built, and then of course, how to sustain it. So all of those things, I'm, you know, looking forward to continue to have these discussions, because it's the very thing that we're doing to reset the foundation, reset what's based, supplemental, and concentration of the resources, and how to make sure that schools like Ms. Colbert are getting the right resources so that they can strategize and develop the right plans for the students, and we can see the quality improve.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So one of the questions that has come up in the chat is specifically for me, Mr. Taylor, where do you stand on school closures? What is your perspective on what's going on? I did want to directly address that. I feel very strongly that simply closing schools is not going to fix the situation. And I feel strongly that simply keeping schools open that are not sustainable is not going to fix the situation. As I look at this with my children, I know I am making individual decisions based on what I believe will be best to set them up for success in life. And I know that every parent makes that exact same choice for their kid in terms of where to take them to school, enroll them, and what will set them up. I firmly believe that regardless of what the specific decision is, we have to have a plan, a long-term plan on how we address the long-term structural issues, the attractiveness of our schools, our public schools, our non-charter public schools, for people to choose to bring their kids there. And that's something that I haven't seen. I do not see the trajectory on how we are changing and transforming the school district's competitiveness yet. And that, for me, is what is needed. I feel like the conversation we're having absolutely is one we have to have. It's one of urgency, reactiveness, response in terms of closing schools or not closing schools. What we need to be building, and what I see us needing to be building, is these schools that are going to attract the enrollment, that are going to attract you know, folks bringing their kids there. I saw the advertisement that Piedmont Unified School District is now advertising inter-district transfers to have kids from other districts go to their schools, because they're trying to get their enrollment numbers up so they can have a sustainable school district. So they're essentially, just like, you know, the charter schools, the private schools, and others, coming to Oakland families and saying, hey, we've got a better option. I know other school districts as well are doing this as well, and these inter-district transfers. And that's something that I feel our conversation has to be on: the quality of the education, the attractiveness of the program, and getting our families to choose how they are putting you know, our schools at the top of their list in terms of where they want to send their kids. So that's, for me, I wanted to emphasize that, because I think that's the conversation we need to have as we move forward, is recognizing that, you know, parents vote with their enrollment decisions. And that's the reality that we have to address. So I know there are a ton of other questions. We weren't going to be able to get to all of the Q&A. I'm going to turn to my team. Kiana, are there other questions that we should lift up before we try and wrap up? I do want to just also land on the question around supporting the students at the welcoming schools that are in transition. What could or should be done to advocate for that? Because I know that's something that was lifted up as well. But Kiana, are there some questions we should lift up?
Yes, I would just uplift another question from Miss Hinton. It wasn't successful. Oh, great question, great span. It wasn't successful growth at Sankofa, and it was already excellent strategy for Parker because they are a strong elementary. It was sad that middle school couldn't keep enrollment. Parker has been the highest performing school for Black males in the district. What has the work of the city to make this I'm sorry, one moment. Neighborhood safe?
Got you. So I think that was possibly a question for me. I heard aspects around the neighborhood safety, and that's definitely something that the city has to be a partner in terms of making neighborhoods safe in order to increase the support. We've got folks from the Nay Avenue Neighborhood Association, Eastmont Hills Neighborhood Association on the line, who have been sort of partners in really emphasizing the areas, the hot spots, working with our community resource officers, neighborhood services coordinators to address aspects of safety that have contributed. There are things that the city is doing with respect to safe routes to schools and making sure that we're, compensating and paying for sort of traffic guard services, the physical improvements of the walkways, the pathways that students take to get to schools as well. On the other aspects of safety, I think it's having that direct line and partnership with the schools, the school leadership as issues arise. So those are all things that absolutely must be front and center. I think folks are familiar with the OFCY program, Oakland Fund for Children and Youth, that augments funding for after-school programs, the work of different parks and rec facilities to offer programming at the schools that are, or for the schools that are nearby, neighboring those centers. So those are all things that have been, I guess to answer that question, that we have done, but absolutely must continue doing to ensure that the neighborhoods are safe in and around the schools as well. Okay, I know we are at 11:40. We were billed to go to 11:30. I want to ask the question. I know that the decision has been made from the school board and that things are moving forward in a certain direction. Are there specific, what are the next steps for the families? Maybe Ms. Colbert, you can share. I believe that there's some specifics that are, there's a forum, something that's coming up. Maybe you can just share what's been communicated to families, what is happening. I know that questions have come up related to, as things move forward, questions around transportation, additional support at receiving schools, some of those questions as well. So Ms. Colbert, maybe you can share.
Sure. So we've offered several spaces just to provide our community with information. We're holding an in-person session this Wednesday. This has gone out to our community and we'll send it out a few times. We're going to be making personal phone calls to each family, informing them to come and have dinner with us on Wednesday evening. First, to just get that overview that some may have missed if they didn't attend the board meeting or if they didn't attend our own Parker held session. Also to walk them through, we'll have laptops available, walk them through the enrollment process, help them understand walking distance to the schools that they're recommending, making sure that they're informed of all the options of schools that are available, and again, distance from those schools. We are soliciting information from some of all the welcoming schools to, provide us with any flyers or any messaging they want to start providing the families with regards to direction and, just the whole welcoming process. So that's our next step is Wednesday evening, a session held for Parker families for information, for support on next steps, and to support them with the school selection and enrollment process. Wednesday at 5 p.m.
Thank you for that. And I will do my best to be there as well as we discussed. And I know that there are some things that are in place. Ms. Grant Dawson, not sure if you can address from the district standpoint, I know that there's the opportunity ticket concept. There's been discussion around transportation support and needs for students, as well as some other very sort of focused, targeted resource investments to support the families. Is that something you can share a little bit about?
So the communication, and thank you for that question, is being developed and distributed regarding, and I see Ms. Colbert put her session flyer. All of the schools that were impacted are doing that. So we're having the conversations not only with the 22-23 schools that are being impacted, but the 23-24. We can, and Councilmember Taylor, you can let us know if there's a place perhaps that you can also share this information as we're sending it. But the transportation questions, we've extended the enrollment to make sure that after the decision, that families had the opportunity to make decisions related to that as well. And so that those decisions are what also helps to manage our response, and then how we arrange, whether it's transportation or additional services for the students that are transitioning. So definitely a lot to come, and that's what's being worked on in rapid speed to get the information out timely and to answer all questions.
Thank you for that. I see a comment about a question about Community Day School, the closing of Community Day School. Isn't this school held to some different standard for being open due to it being the quote unquote expulsion school? Why must it close, ? How can we keep it open, not only for its current use in saving our most vulnerable children, but for its potential to do this in a more expansive way? I'm not sure, Community Day hasn't come up yet, but since that question was there, I thought I'd lift it up just in case there's a response you can provide, Ms. Grant Dawson.
Right. So I can briefly, and I do think that, again, with all the schools, perhaps another session to talk about the school structure, but the county does host a Community Day school program. And so due to the number of students that we have in Community Day, the thought was to, which many districts do, it's either the districts hosting the Community Day school and county run programs merged with the district, or it could be vice versa. So in this instance, we're recommending that we transition our students to the county's program, as the county hosts students from different districts in their Community Day school program. And it is a more robust program.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that. So yes, we knew that we weren't going to cover everything. This was just the beginning of the conversation. There are many folks who were invited, but were unable to join. And so look forward to incorporating them into the upcoming conversation. But we wanted to create the space to have this. I've already gotten some comments, some texts on what we should cover in future meetings. I think that's where I would like to land for today, is, inviting folks in the attendance queue, inviting those to contribute. We will have a survey that goes out. And really the question is, how do we sort of plot forward in a way that addresses these issues, hits the larger, more systemic challenges that aren't just reacting to a, for lack of a better term, a $10 million opportunity, or a sort of a sense of urgency that's imposed by some agency, but that we are actually making progress towards doing what's necessary to improve the structure of our schools, to improve the quality of education and the outcomes for our kids. And when I say outcomes, I'm not just talking about test scores. I'm talking about the life outcomes that actually set our kids up for success in the long term, and what our schools are intended to do. So thank you everyone for joining today. Please fill out the survey when you receive it so that we can hear from you, hear how we should move forward as we incorporate more into the conversation, continue these tough discussions for really improving the lives of our students and the opportunities that they have before them. So thank you, Ms. Colbert, for your leadership, for your words, your candor in this discussion. Thank you to Ms. Dawson that I believe had to leave to another meeting, and to my team District 6, who's helped to pull this event, and for everybody who took the time out of your day to log in, to contribute through the chat, the Q&A, and other forums as well. Looking forward to continuing the dialogue. Thank you and have a great day.